John was asking if I had any tips for him on how to remember the earlier items in the list because it seems that he's having a hard time remembering the earlier ones or forgetting them. And so in this video, I'm going to quickly explain why that happens and jump into giving you tips on how to prevent this because even I suffer from this time to time. So let's get started. So what happens when you're learning something is over time, I'm talking about just in general, the longer it's been since you actually seen the information or review your images, it goes down. Your ability to recall goes down. And so a crude graph might look something like this. It's not what it actually looks like, but just pretty much more time passes, the lower recall that you have for the information you're trying to remember. So the first tip I have for you is that when you're actually learning the information, you have to make sure that you're paying attention to the first couple pieces of information because what happens is for me in competition, like if I'm memorizing words, so the words, the event starting and boom, I just jump right into it and I'm kind of excited to get started. And so the first few, I just pass by them, even though I see them in my head. I don't create the images or I don't even actually, register them in my memory palace. And so I just completely fly through them. Then I get into the rhythm, and that's where, it's very easy for me to start recalling these images that I'm picturing for all these different words. And so the first tip is to really make sure that you're paying attention to the first items in the list. So wherever you're learning, actually paying attention to what they are and not getting excited, not getting eager, just, okay, let me just take it one at a time. So that's a first tip, and that's makes a huge difference, especially like John was saying, memorizing names. When you first meet someone, you're like, hey, I'm Johnny. Hey, you're Beth. Nice to meet you. 5 seconds later, forget that person. Like, oh, what was that person's name? It's because maybe you're nervous, or maybe you're wondering, okay, who else do I have to meet? And so you completely forget that person's name because you're not even paying attention to that name. So that's the first tip, to focus. Now, the second tip I have for you is if you can, review the information because the more times you review your imagery and the words, the more it sticks into your brain. And so if I'm going through all these words, right, I'm like, okay, da, 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 got it. Boom, go back and review. So sometimes you don't have the time to review, and so this is where the next tip kind of comes into. But if you do have the time, take the time and actually review the information. Why do you want to forget any information at all? If you have the time, why is it going to hurt you just to review the information? And so the last tip I have for you deals with how much information you can memorize at once. Okay? So let's say in this event I have 1 minute. And let's say I just started out and I try to memorize all 50 words. Well, what's going to happen is I'm going to have a lot of gaps in the words when I recall them. And that's because I just started out. My ability just to retain the information going through it one time hasn't been expanded to 50 words. It might just be the first 10 words. And so that's why you need to practice these techniques. So in the beginning, yeah, you might only be able to hold 10 words, but you start practicing and practicing your ability to retain just kind of a basic amount expands to maybe 30 and maybe 50 all in the same amount of time. And so you want to see how many words, how many items you can remember at once before it starts getting fuzzy at the very beginning. Because I could go through probably 30 words and be pretty solid just one time. But if I push 50 when I'm practicing, I have gaps here and there. Right now it's like 10 to 15 missing words. And so I'm trying to expand it one time through, right? Trying to expand my capability of how many words can I memorize just looking at it at one time. And so this may be an issue for you as well, because maybe you're trying to memorize a grocery list just very quickly, go through it once, okay. And so that's why you're having gaps, because you're not able to memorize 20 or 30 things at once, just at one glance. And so that's something you have to pay attention to as well. And so with those 3 tips, making sure that you're actually focusing on the first couple items of a list, reviewing, and actually taking the time to see how many items you could remember at one time, going through it once, is going to help you not to forget the earlier items. Because just in general, over time, it goes down. The information, your images, they just fade. Even if it's in 1 minute time span or 30 days, it keeps going down. And so hopefully you find these tips useful and you enjoy the video, and I'll see you next time.